Hello, folks. So I was thinking before we get started in just 1 or 2 minutes, how about if you put your where you live in the chat box and maybe your affiliation, and we'll get a sense of who's here today. That'll go. Disconcerting. So welcome, Louisa. Peter and I are from Canada. Ooh, Fiji. Everyone's dream is to visit Fiji at least once. Thanks for being here. Sao Paulo. I bet it's beautiful there in Sao Paulo. Great. Program of Ambassador of Planetary Health. That sounds like a great program. Anyone who's just arrived, we're inviting people to put in the chat box where you're from and perhaps what your affiliation is. Aha, okay. It's time to start. And so, well, oh, great. I bet it is. That's wonderful. So I am going to carry on admitting people, but we'll get going here. So welcome, everyone. My name is Julie Johnston, and I'm with Greenheart Education, and I work with Peter Carter, MD. And it's neat that he's a medical doctor, and this is a planetary health conference. That works out well. So Peter Carter is a retired family physician who practiced. Oh, Peter's saying make it shorter. He doesn't want me to say all those wonderful things about him, but he practiced medicine for 40 years. And he's a founding director of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. And more recently, he's founder of the Climate Emergency Institute. And he's presented on sustainable development, environmental health policy, biodiversity, and climate change and ocean issues at international science and climate change conferences in North and South America, Europe, and Asia. So Peter is an expert, or he was an expert reviewer for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Fifth Assessment Report in 2014. He's now involved in the expert review of the AR6, the next one that's going to be coming out. And he also was an expert reviewer for that IPCC special report on 1.5 degrees C, which everyone heard about in 2018. He's also, as I mentioned, the founder and director of the Climate Emergency Institute. And in 2018, he co-authored a book entitled Unprecedented Crime, Climate Science Denial and Game Changers for Survival. So I'm going to share the screen now so that you can see what's going on. And hopefully I'll still be able to let people in. And okay, so that's what you're attending, is the unprecedented planetary health emergency of committed global climate change and essential responses. And here's my role today. I would like to invite you, when Dr. Carter's presentation is over, and that will be 30 to 45 minutes, let's hear from you folks, and specifically, what are your thoughts and feelings on his ideas for the conversion approach to solutions? So here are some starter questions to be thinking about already. What was your reaction to what he had to say? Do these things resonate for you? Do you think they're doable, achievable? Could they catch on? Could these ideas go viral? And what are the challenges that these ideas face? Okay. And then what excites you about these ideas? Okay, now we're going to get ourselves comfortable technically here. I don't think we can go full screen and still admit people.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Okay,
that's fine.
So we'll leave it like this.
Yeah.
And then we can admit people as they arrive.
Yeah, yeah.
I know there are other sessions just ending and some overlap today. So, Dr. Carter, take it away. Okay, I'll just get out of your way here.
Julie.
Sorry. Whoops, sorry. Being very noisy.
The clicker doesn't work if it's not full screen.
Oh, okay.
So. Okay. Hello everybody. Thanks for attending. So the topic is the global climate planetary health emergency, and from the point of view of the science, my background, by the way, is environmental health policy, protection, development. So global climate system change is the unprecedented top threat to planetary health today. I think most people are now aware of this. And this applies to sort of both definitions of planetary health, the strict definition of environmental pollution and degradation, how that affects human population health, and the inferred actual health of the living, life-supporting biosphere, Mother Earth. What I learned as a boy in England was Mother Nature. The scientific issue actually is pollution, air, water, oceans, and atmosphere. And the pollution is impacting not only the climate, it's impacting the climate system. And the climate system, importantly, includes all the systems of the biosphere. So we truly are talking about our Earth. I follow on a monthly basis the global climate change indicators. And from a medical health point of view, they're the health data of Earth. Today, these indicators are sadly at record highs, that's adverse highs. They're tracking the worst case scenario, and they're accelerating.
Okay, I'll just get rid of this. Sorry.
Okay.
Techno difficulties.
So I have a long list on this slide. We're starting with what everybody is probably almost certainly well aware of, personal lifestyle measures and values. So there's a lot of conversions I'm going to present to you, and the first one is ecological personal conversion. And interestingly, this was proposed by no less than Pope Francis. Another example is creation care. Another long-standing, most important example is indigenous values and indigenous wisdom and indigenous customary law. Not to forget, it's crucial for sustainability and also for climate stability and ocean stability. That is peaceful coexistence. So what can we each of us do is, of course, always the question. The most readily effective thing that individually we can do is conversion of our diet to become vegan, and particularly concentrating on local produce, organic produce from regenerative agriculture. And that is the good news, because certainly where we are in North America, veganism is catching on really, really fast. Secondly, and maybe this isn't thought about quite as often, is individually divest out of fossil fuels. Check what your savings are doing, check what your bank accounts are doing, and preferably then reinvest to clean renewable energy. Clean renewable energy investment, by the way, is performing just as well, and in many cases and regions better than fossil fuel energy. So that's another good news. Personal lifestyle, values of vices and virtues. They go way, way, way back. And we need to have them back again today, I think. The value and life living style of sharing and reciprocity, avoiding debt, no plane travel, no car travel, reduce, reuse, recycle is still essential for dealing with climate and ocean change, or rather, climate and ocean instability and disruptions. Be frugal. That's a old, long-standing term. Be sort of have a humble lifestyle. Don't consume where you don't have to consume. Don't do more than you have to do. Avoid buying anything new. Buy small. Use hand tools. So there's quite a selection. And you may have some more good ones. But, however, the fact certainly today is that the best of personal lifestyles and lifestyle changes will not stop the destruction of Earth by the world economy and government policy. Social campaigns, of course, must continue protesting against the annihilation of life on Earth, the wrecking of the living planet, and a future legacy of collapse and misery. And we have some good examples: Extinction Rebellion, the Young People, Earth Guardians, Fridays for the Future. What's the root cause of climate disruption and ocean disruption? It's actually economics. It's our economics, which we call the economy, which has become the world economy. And it's a long-standing economics of exploitation and conflict. A great quote going back 2,000 years: the love of money is the root of evil. Usury, lending money at interest, used to be a sin. Today, we need to be aware of the huge military resources, economic, financial resources wasted by fighting, mainly over fossil fuels. And also outer space exploration. I mean, mining the moon, terraforming Mars, when we have a home planet to look after and preserve and restore. Absolute insanity. And the most terrible crime on today's children and future generations. Obviously, instead, these huge resources. I mean, we're talking for world military expenditures of well over $1 trillion a year now. So these huge resources must be dedicated to protecting and restoring planet Earth. We've been aware of the root cause of our economics for a long, long time. Here's a illustration from the New Scientist magazine going back 2008. And the headline was "How Our Economy is Killing the Earth." So this is the root cause: the irrational, perverse, fossil-fueled, industrial consumer culture world economy. And this has been known for decades. I mean, countless books and articles and papers have been written on this. A much more recent, similar publication, in a way, to the New Scientist, was published in 2015, called "The Trajectory of the Anthropocene." I do not like the term Anthropocene. I want us all to work on and believe that we can remain in the Cenozoic age, this wonderful age of mammals and flowering plants, huge forests, ocean teeming with marine life. The Anthropocene, this trajectory that you see, on the one side in red, you see what are called socioeconomic trends. Those are the effects of our consumer economy: more plane travel, more cars, increased GDP, goes on and on. And then on the right in green, you see what's happening to Earth system trends. And they are all being damaged, polluted, degraded at, clearly you can see, an accelerating rate. So on the right, I've just taken 2 slides to put this into a nutshell. As the GDP goes up, the state of the biosphere goes down. There's more pollution, there's more degradation. So that's a clear proof of our economy being a thoroughly bad idea, to put it mildly. Quotes, the greatest, most far-reaching market failure. That is how the 2006 UK Stern Commission, The Economics of Climate Change, described the economic nature of climate change. And by the way, even today, this report is excellent. The perverse world economic model that is dominating the world now clearly has to be changed. For example, I read recently the president of Bolivia proposed an economy for Mother Earth. And then we have ecological economics, which has been around as an international association for many years. However, as I say, only immediate market failure corrections, which can easily applied by governments, can slow the destruction of the biosphere right now. So we all have to push for that. Financing. This is an annual publication. It's put out by RAN, the Rainforest Action Network, and it's a very good and important publication because it points to the financing of climate chaos, climate and ocean destruction by the big global corporate banks. So you see, we're talking up to $300 billion a year from Morgan Chase being poured into more fossil fuel extraction, production, and distribution. This clearly has to stop, and we have to all get behind RAN and tell the banks that they have to stop doing this. So what do we need? We need a true zero carbon combustion economy. The burning age is over. So we can stop burning all fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas. We've known that for a long, long time. We also have to stop burning wood because there is a really rotten industry, particularly in Europe, of burning wood pellets in industrial power plants. So that's why we're calling this a zero carbon combustion economy, no burning. And this has to take priority over these false economic solutions, which are being promoted more and more nowadays, such as carbon cap and trade, carbon neutral, net zero carbon measures, carbon offsetting, negative emissions, which assume carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere, bioenergy, as I've mentioned, burning of wood pellets, biofuels, and finally, and worst of all, so-called BECCS, bioenergy, carbon capture and storage.
So why is that so bad?
Why is BECCS so bad?
Yeah.
Firstly, it's burning biomass. But secondly, it's assuming something which we cannot do at all today, and which there is no research and development of any significant nature, which is it relies on so-called carbon capture and sequestration, or carbon capture and storage. I'm very happy that Greta Thunberg keeps on mentioning that her generation are being sort of condemned to supposedly rely on a technology which she's quite right is probably never going to happen. It certainly won't happen with a transformation of the so-called free market economy. And we don't need this at all. We absolutely do not need this. We are swimming, we're living in a world of energy. So it's a good question. Thanks. And so, quite simply, the only way to stop planet Earth destroying climate and ocean destruction is to stop the pollution. Zero pollution goes back many years. Now, stopping pollution means conversion. And this is the key which I'm trying, and we all need, I think, to get out It's pretty simple. It's converting our greenhouse gas polluting current goods and services to the well-known non-polluting, what have always been called alternatives. And they're not alternatives anymore. They're the survival measures which we all have to switch to. So the point here is, in the case of climate change, because carbon dioxide practically lasts forever in the atmosphere, heating the planet and acidifying the oceans, this means that lower pollution, lower carbon, more efficient, it's never going to be good enough, right? So it has to be stopping greenhouse gas pollution. And in the case of fossil fuels, that also means stopping air pollution. And that fossil fuel air pollution is deadly. The latest research showing that it's killing 8 million people a year. So if anything has to be stopped right away, it's clearly that. So we can and we need to make this 100% conversion off the polluting goods and services, fossil fuels, our modern agriculture, agribusiness, food production, to the non-polluting alternatives that I think we all know are entirely practical and have been around for actually quite a long time. So some illustration of alternatives here. So obviously we can switch 100% of all our power, our energy, to zero carbon combustion, or a clean renewable, which means everlasting energy. And this switch means a golden future for present young people and all future generations. I want to make this point. The renewable clean energy is way better than probably any of us realize. We all realize how bad polluting, planet destroying, and ocean destroying fossil fuel energy is. But these amazing, fantastic, and rapidly growing clean zero combustion energy are no longer alternatives, and they're increasing at a rapid rate. And they are now ready to take over economically from fossil fuel energy. The only reason they aren't is the next topic, which is the absolutely disgraceful, deplorable practice of governments subsidizing the fossil fuel industry. So this is an illustration I just did years ago, which I called Stop and Switch. So at the time when I did this, this was an illustration actually, which was published by the International Energy Agency. And on the left, you see the size of the fossil fuel subsidies at the time. And this was 10 years ago. And on the right, the subsidies given to renewable energy. And we're certainly, they're just as bad today. So these fossil fuel subsidies are ecocidal, they're suicidal, and the climate solution, of course, is to stop and switch all these subsidies.
And you haven't mentioned how much they are.
Coming up very, very soon.
Okay.
And the International Monetary Fund, no less, in 2015 published a report which certainly made headlines, that the total amount of fossil fuel subsidies amount to over $5 trillion a year. So I have here, and this is a bit misplaced, so I apologize, but before I get to the IMF, some other obvious solutions to the long-time well-known economic market failure. So some solutions that we need to tell our governments to do and demand that our governments start to do right away. So stop fossil fuel and other carbon combustion subsidies. Stop greenhouse gas intensive food production subsidies. Both of these have been alluded to for several years by our excellent United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Apply a fully costed pollution charge to large central corporate pollutions. This was featured in the 2006 UK Stern Commission report. Prohibit bank financing of fossil fuel projects. We just cannot have our big global corporate banks investing in the death of the future. Don't allow any future discounting to damages caused by climate and ocean disruption. That's a common practice. And if there's a question, I can go into a little bit, though, so of course, I'm not an economist. But future discounting is absolutely out of the question with respect to climate and ocean damages. Apply a wealth tax. Oxfam has done excellent reports periodically pointing out that the majority of the world hardly pollutes the planet with greenhouse gas emissions at all. The vast majority of the greenhouse gas pollution is coming from a minority of the wealthy, well-to-do in the world now as a whole, not just America and Saudi Arabia and Europe, but we have many, many, many billionaires in China and India. And so we need a wealth tax across the board. Tax the main consumer sources of greenhouse gas pollution. That's now necessary. But at the same time, protect with safety nets and protect by avoiding the taxation of the poor and the disadvantaged. Educate the public that climate change is now an existential threat to our survival and what the most effective solutions are. Now, a quote a few years ago at an Earth Summit by United Nations Secretary General was that climate change, he said, was quite simply an existential threat to the survival of life on Earth and particularly to humankind. And that was an accurate and bold statement, and I applaud him for it. We also need our governments to fund now a rapid development of clean energy research and development and infrastructure. Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars must be dedicated to this vast, biggest ever venture of human civilization. We need to fund major world security, protected forestry and marine reserves. We have forestry reserves, we have marine reserves, we need far, far bigger. We know they're successful and they need to be funded because they need to be big enough and protected enough to halt the sixth mass extinction, referred to by Cavallos and Ehrlich several years ago in their classic paper, The Sixth Extinction and Biological Extinction of Vertebrate Life on Earth. And we also need to fund the protection and the assistance of indigenous forest caretakers, because there's been some good research confirming what is pretty obvious, that the indigenous people who have inhabited and lived sustainability in the world's great forests, those regions are not being deforested. They're not being deforested. They're not being burned. They're not being turned into carbon emissions from carbon sinks, as tragically the forests, and of course I'm talking about the tropical forests in the Amazon outside of their protected regions. I'm glad that the scientists have published on this and got attention to it. So back to the criminally evil practice of governments continuing to subsidize fossil fuels. And by the way, the International Energy Agency, that has done good work on this for many years, tells us that in the past couple of years, these subsidies are actually increasing. So here is the International Monetary Fund study of 2015, $5.3 trillion. This is really interesting. Most of the subsidies here are quite properly classified by IMF as subsidies. They're from the so-called externalization of the socioeconomic and environmental costs of fossil fuel pollution. IMF repeated this study just a year, 18 months ago. It came out still just over $5 trillion a year. So there has to be a united all-out campaign a constant campaign to force our governments to stop this and stop it immediately. Yes, they promised to stop them for years and years and years, the G8, for example, but clearly they won't do it unless we force them to do it. So back to this approach of conversions. We, we have to switch our practices of industrial production, our services and goods, which we can do totally off the greenhouse gas pollution ones that we have today, onto what we know are not greenhouse gas pollution. Now, this is a great example because this is conversion of construction for carbon dioxide pollution. If you go anywhere in the world, you'll see that the new construction is of steel and concrete. Nothing could be worse for greenhouse gas pollution and the destruction of our climate and of our oceans. Steel, of course, has to be heated in blast furnaces with coal, and concrete is made by burning limestone. And limestone is our other big carbon dioxide sink, which has occurred over millions and millions and hundreds of millions of years. So we are burning all our fossil carbon, which has allowed life over the past billion years to develop and prosper and flourish, such as it is today in the Kenozoic. That's crazy. What we can be doing, and what now we are seeing happen more and more, is to use construction, of course, with wood. Um, we've been doing that in Europe for hundreds and hundreds of years. And now we have modern manufactured engineered wood, and we can build multi-story buildings with wood. Now, that sinks carbon for hundreds of years. So that's good news. Agriculture, of course, I look quite simply at climate disruption from two big sources: industrial energy production and industrial food production. So modern, and this is also good news because there is more and more and more awareness, more and more being written about agriculture as a major source and food production as a major source of greenhouse gas emissions, particularly methane from livestock, nitrous oxide from chemical agribusiness, chemical intensive agriculture. And so this is just an illustration of the approach of carbon farming. Organic is best for climate, agroforestry is best for climate, and of course, soil and biomass management, no-till agriculture, all of these are a big conversion of what is the dominant industrial model of agriculture and food production. So there's a good illustration. This is how it's done on the Great Plains, the great bread baskets of the world. And traditionally, we have regenerative organic agriculture. So this is coming back. Good news is there's more and more and more of it. There's more and more organic produce and locally produced produce you can buy in your stores. And permaculture is also a fine example of this form of food production. So nitrous oxide emissions, as I mentioned, from chemical intensive, and also carbon dioxide emissions from highly mechanized approach to industrial agriculture, and also monocropping, which has other problems of its own. So we switch that to carbon retaining agriculture, mixed organic, natural, organic fertilizer, natural fertilizers, and permaculture, as I mentioned. Individually, we have to therefore convert our diets 100% again, 100% conversion. That means no meat, no dairy, so that we are not emitting methane. And it means the healthiest possible diet, which of course is vegetables, grains, fruits, and other plants. And as I say, the good news is that veganism is catching on fast. Subsidies also come in governments are also doing a bad, rotten thing by subsidizing this polluting form of agriculture. And here you see the amount in tens of billions of dollars of meat and dairy agriculture compared to far less subsidizing of what is most healthy for Mother Earth, for the planet, and for ourselves. So switch those subsidies too. So we now come to the science of the climate change emergency. This is not so encouraging, but it's very important that we are aware of it and we face it and we understand the basics. So we need to use the science knowledge to help bolster our courage, our strength, our conviction, and our compassion. To avoid a global temperature increase of 2 degrees C and for 1.5 degrees C, greenhouse gas emissions must be declining by 2020 and drop to near zero before 2050. This illustration is from the IPCC fourth assessment in 2000, the IPCC fourth assessment in 2007. This is going way back. So you see, we have known that we have to allow emissions, we have to make our conversion so our emissions drop to near zero over the next few decades. We've known this for a long time. It's not new. This is the new version, which confirms this. This is the famous IPCC 1.5 degrees C report, which says that CO2 emissions must drop 50% by 2030, and they can, and reach net zero carbon emissions before 2050. However, in this illustration, and I forgot to put the numbers up, in this illustration from the best case scenario for 1.5C, the net zero was with virtual zero fossil fuel emissions by 2050. So when we're talking net zero, we have to, every time we mention, say, this means net zero with no fossil fuel emissions. Otherwise, it can mean practically nothing. Commitment. This is why is climate change also being so bad? Why is it being always so frightening? Because of commitment, because whatever the global temperature is today, we are committed, we are locked into a much higher degree of warming, even if we do everything right in the future. So we have two commitments. We have this climate science commitment, which is inevitable, but the bigger commitment even today is that our governments are condemning us to a much higher degree of climate change by their own policy, which we've talked about. The condemned commitment, which is a crime of all time, of actual commitment of government policy, real government policy, not promises, puts the world at 3 degrees C of global temperature increase by 2100. Anything over 2 degrees C is unthinkable. But 3 degrees C by 2100 is 4 degrees C by 2300. At 2 degrees C, we have a decline in world food production, and we have runaway or hothouse Earth being triggered by multiple large sources of feedback emissions. So 3 degrees C is insane, it's ecocidal, it's suicidal, and it's biocidal by our own governments, and they must be told. So this brings us up to this month, April 2021, and this complicated illustration is a very valuable illustration from the Climate Action Tracker, which is by climate change experts. And this shows the current emissions gap to 2030. In the red, you see what has to happen. And the IPCC chair in 2009, Hossein Lee, no less, made a very strong statement that emissions have to decline, global emissions have to decline 2020 and thereafter. He used the word immediate several times. So this is what we have to force our governments to do. They can do it easily by stopping subsidizing and doing those so-called economic market failure corrections. But on the right in the blue, you'll see what's happening. These are the pledges, so-called promises, national emissions targets, which are the worst crime ever. And these are the targets by our own governments. They are planetary destructive targets. So in December, you see Climate Action Tracker had the national emissions going up. And with the latest promises, and they are only promises, there's a slight reduction, but there still is not a global decline in emissions. So there is this huge, huge gap between what the science says we have to do and our governments say they are doing and will do. But the defining reality is that our own world governments have pledged $313 billion to fossil fuel intensive sectors for the post-COVID recovery. You'll know that there was a sharp reduction, the biggest decline ever, in carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuels due to the temporary pause of the world economy by the COVID. Already, governments are pouring money into the fossil fuel industry so that already we are almost at the same level of emissions as we were pre-COVID in 2019. $313 billion. This report, this illustration here is from the International Energy Agency, and it shows that world governments have already thrown away any chance of staying below 1.5 degrees C limit, and that 1.5 degrees C, according to the IPCC 1.5 C report, will be reached as early as 2035. So if you see here, you'll see there's the COVID drop, the sharp COVID drop 2000, and here we are 2000, 2021 with an equally sharp increase, an equally sharp uptick in the emissions. And the International Energy Agency predicts that 2021 will be the second largest increase in fossil fuel carbon dioxide emissions ever. This shows what's happening with regards to the indicators, with regards to the science we have, accelerating global surface heating and accelerating atmospheric CO2. This is very useful from the Oxford University. It's called the Global Warming Index. And the reddish line here is our global heating caused by our emissions. It removes the other extraneous factors. You see that clearly this is accelerating very fast right up to the present time. The green is the cumulative atmospheric CO2, also accelerating. This is climate craziness. This is insane. It must be stopped, and it can be stopped. This is the IPCC 1.5 degrees C report's projection of what we will be into if we stay on our current model of economics, and if we stay on the current track of emissions. We will be at 1.5 degrees C by 2035, and we will be at 2 degrees C as early as 2045. This is a dire emergency. It's also an emergency because hunger and malnutrition are on the rise again. The world community has managed to slowly get hunger and malnutrition on a slow decline since 2005 here. This is from the FAO, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, their latest annual publication on food security and nutrition. And you'll see that in the past 3 years, hunger and malnutrition are on the rise again. They're projected to rise even faster, and it's mainly due to conflict and climate change. Conflict and climate change, of course, both at times go together. This is from a recent publication. It shows increased hunger at 1.5 degrees C. A world largely a world of hunger and malnutrition. This is another recent publication. It shows the yields of tropical crops, how they decline at low degrees of climate change. You see wheat going down sharply, you see rice going down less sharp, and you see maize going down. We have known, the IPCC has been telling us since year 2001, that tropical low latitude regions will lose food at low degrees of global climate change. So this is a terrible, terrible crime as well, that governments are allowing and perpetuating this. So this is more science. This shows accelerating global atmospheric greenhouse gases from 2000 through to the present year, January of 2021. Top is carbon dioxide accelerating. It's now at 416 parts per million of air. Methane, middle in blue, accelerating very fast in the past few years, as you see. Nitrous oxide also accelerating. More recent data, even, this is from NOAA, US, this is April 2021. Carbon dioxide accelerating faster than ever. Methane still accelerating. Nitrous oxide also accelerating very fast. Of course, the most important one, obviously, is carbon dioxide accelerating extremely fast. This is 2017 to 2021, just recent. And you see this recent uptick here, despite the COVID decline in emissions. And this is the longer term, 1960 up to 2021. So remember, carbon dioxide is responsible for the vast majority of the global heating, and of course responsible for all of the ocean acidification. This is from the Scripps Institute. What we were looking at was from the NOAA, and this is also in the US. This shows the atmospheric CO2 at its unprecedented level and its unprecedented rate of increase. And this is the record from 1700, in fact, up to the present time, 2021 April. So up, fast, fast, fast. Here at 300 parts per million is the 1 million year limit from the ice cores. And here we are at 416. 278 down here is the pre-industrial value level. Consequently, we have accelerating global surface temperature increase. This is showing from 1880 through to 2020. It's from NASA GISS. On the left here, you see the global average. That's land and sea, accelerating very fast over the past decade. This is global land only, shooting up. Land temperature increase last year was 1.62 degrees C. We are in a dire planetary Earth emergency. These are the maps from NASA GISS. Time's up, Julie?
Pretty soon.
Okay, so I'll be finishing with these maps. Global land sea on the left from NASA, and land only on the right, which I've adapted to highlight the land. This is last year. Look at this maximal heating anywhere on Earth of Siberia. And Siberia is the location, the region which holds most of the permafrost. And permafrost holds a massive amount of carbon, double all the carbon in the atmosphere. Permafrost is thawing, and it's emitting all three greenhouse gases as it thaws. This shows accelerating northern hemisphere global temperature, and this shows the lower rate of accelerating of southern hemisphere. So the northern hemisphere global north people and policymakers should be very, very alarmed by this. I apologize that this slide is a bit mixed up. This is the Arctic. The Arctic is heating up faster than anywhere else. This is bad, bad, bad because Arctic sea ice is melting away. We have permafrost thawing, which is the most serious aspect of the Arctic amplification. The Arctic is now warming at about 3 times the global average. In these regions of Siberia, it's warming at faster, more than 3 times the global average even. You'll see again how on year 2000, Arctic temperature increase takes off compared to the global average temperature increase, and both are accelerating, but the Arctic accelerating very, very fast. Here's that region of Siberia, and in 2000, the temperature increase from these regions in Siberia were 3 degrees C above average, which is about 3.3 degrees C above pre-industrial, and more than 5 degrees C above average in these coastal areas. This is terrible, terrible. And it's terrible because the Arctic is vital for the stability of our climate. This is from a recent IPCC assessment, 2019, and this shows the oceans. This shows accelerating marine impacts on a worst case scenario. We have ocean heat on the top accelerating. We have marine heat waves accelerating. Those heat waves are destroying the tropical warm water coral reefs. We have ocean acidification accelerating. We have ocean deoxygenation almost on an accelerating track. Ocean deoxygenation is the result of ocean heating. So the ocean, the unseen ocean, is doing very, very badly due to industrial greenhouse gas emissions, atmospheric pollution. And while, of course, life in the oceans can do very well without life on land is dependent on life and the health of the oceans in the long term. This is from the Arctic. Another IPCC assessment in 2009 shows the rapid increase of adverse impacts on planetary snow and ice, the so-called cryosphere. Ocean sea ice crashing down. The red here is the worst case scenario that we're on. The blue is the best case scenario, which we've already missed. So Arctic sea ice, rapid decline. Arctic snow cover, rapid decline. Loss of sea ice and loss of snow means less reflection of solar energy away from the planet, which means more heating. So the more sea ice we lose, the more heating we get. The more northern hemisphere snow cover we lose, the more heating we get. This is the most important one, the permafrost, as I say. Here's the thawing, the near surface permafrost area, the permanently frozen land becoming less and less as it's heated up by Arctic amplification. Greenland.
You got to finish.
Okay. Last mention, Greenland ice sheet, Antarctic ice sheet, they're all now losing mass faster than ever. The glaciers, of course, as a whole. We hear a lot about the Greenland and the ice sheets melting and the sea level rise. Of course, in the future, this will be catastrophic for coastal areas, but by far the most important thing is those feedbacks, the loss of permafrost, the melting of permafrost, also the feedbacks from the collapse of the Amazon and the destruction of the tropical forest. I'll stop there on that tragic negative note, and thank you for listening.
Okay. So let's see if we can make the technology work for us again. So we have lots of people here. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Oh, wow. Look at all these smiling faces. That's great. Thank you. So what we want to do is open it up. I think I'm going to have to put in earphones. Let's just take that out and see how it goes. So we'll open it up. Any sort of questions, reflections, reactions, just unmute yourself and yeah, let us know what you'd like to share with us. And I'll turn that up so I can hear you. And who wants to go first? I gotta come over a bit more. Let's see what's in the chat box. Yeah, thanks everybody for attending. That's, yeah, Earth shot, not moonshot. Good point. The market
like
corrections. Yeah, I hope you got that, Richard. You got the market corrections there. Could we make the slides full screen? I guess we couldn't. We're not very good at the technology. I'm really sorry about.
Julie was admitting people, and it didn't seem to go full screen. But we are folks. We are recording this. This is recorded.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not.
No.
Oh,
sorry.
Oh,
we'll work it out.
Okay. I will be recording this, I promise you, and I'll put it on my YouTube channel. So it's there as a resource, and you can find my YouTube channel. All you have to do is Google Peter Carter Climate, and it'll come up right away.
There you go.
Hi.
E-I-E-I-O.
Yes, it is my it's my child here.
That's fine.
Well,
we're
gonna have her in this talk. I am sorry if you don't like kids. It's your problem.
Oh yeah, lovely.
Yeah, I think you could have made it full screen.
Yeah.
Down on the icon if you care to learn, maybe. Yes, try that. That's the thing.
Yes.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Okay.
So then you could use either the arrows on your keyboard to go up, down, and blah.
Yeah.
Right.
Or click.
You have noticed how old we both are, right?
You're fantastic people.
But we can still learn.
Still lots to learn. So we have a few questions here. So Peter, I'll just read them.
I was hoping to actually make some questions.
Sure,
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for saving the day. I was going to bed without hearing the whole day in from any panelist the real finger in the wound here, which is the economic system.
Yes.
I must confess I'm a bit tired of hearing that we should exchange plastic straws to save the environment or save the planet. It is no one talks about the economic system. So I have 4 questions, but I think maybe that's too much because there are other people. So first one is, why say that the root cause is the global economy and not capitalism? So why did you, Dr. Katter, chose global economy rather than the political economic system?
I can answer that. Our capitalism now is a lot worse than the capitalism of Adam Smith. We now have everything is on credit, right? Everything's borrowed from the banks. Adam Smith hated the banks, apparently. And now we have the banks practically owning the world, right? They'll own more of the world now with COVID. And so I like to make the distinction between, I would say perhaps corporate credit capitalism is what I tend to call it. The indigenous people historically, they had a form of capitalism. So, I'd like to sort of respect that as well. Plus, I must confess that it's very difficult to, in our culture, particularly where I live, to say, well, we've got to get off capitalism. And we unfortunately don't have time to do it. So we've got to make these capitalist market corrections. But I do agree with your sentiment that modern capitalism is a awful, destructive monster that we've created.
I often call it our predatory, cannibalistic, suicidal, globalized form of Western capitalist economics. Yeah, it's bad news.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, thank you. I have one more questions, but I'll maybe do that later.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Raphael.
There's a Canadian book which was published a few years ago called The Cancer Stage of Capitalism. It's a good book.
The Cancer Stage?
Yeah.
Okay. So Federico, at least we should start with universities not investing in this. Good point.
Absolutely.
Divestment campaigns. And they're very, very, they've been very successful in North America. I'm not sure what it's like in other parts of the world. Does anybody have any experience with divestment at the university level in South America, for example? Nope. Well, there you go. There's something to do right off the bat.
The next question is really good.
Yeah. Okay. So Ivan said, are clean energy technologies really pollution free? No. Don't they need raw materials to be built? Maybe calling them less polluting technologies would be more realistic.
Yeah, it's a good question. I tend to remind myself to call them lowest emitting technologies. For example, and they are improving, okay? As they're getting more efficient, they're getting less polluting, and clearly there's no comparison between fossil fuel energy. But for example, the big, huge wind turbines, right? I mean, there's a lot of steel and aluminum goes into that, and there's a massive amount of concrete at their base. But there's very good hope and optimism that we will sort of rise above that form of wind turbine, and kites up higher up in the air will derive a lot more energy, and clearly they'll be less polluting. So I think there's optimism as well, but it's a very good question. It's very apt.
The other thing that we talk about sometimes is that right now we're building our renewable energy infrastructure using fossil fuel energy.
Yes.
And so if we can get to that point where we're building our renewable energy infrastructure with renewable energy, then that's going to make it all a lot less polluting.
That's an excellent point, Joe.
Okay. Rafaela was asking, what is a runaway hothouse earth trigger?
Runaway is a term seldom used by the climate change experts. Occasionally, what they use more, and there's been a very recent paper, it's called hothouse earth. So both runaway and hothouse earth mean the same. They are the result of the multiple enormous sources of feedback emissions on planet Earth. Then, because of the Cenozoic life, there never ever has been more carbon in the soil, in the trees, in the oceans than today. Therefore, global heating is fundamentally and inherently an insane thing to do, because inevitably it results in the planet itself under global warming, producing more global warming, the so-called ultimate vicious fatal cycle. The sources are permafrost, which I've mentioned. The soil itself, when it warms, it increases its carbon emissions. The forests are drying, and under temperature stress and increased drought and temperature stress, they are dying back. There's increased mortality of trees, and they are currently, I'm afraid, the science says, switching from sinking a huge amount of carbon to actually being a source of carbon. The ocean is also a huge sink of carbon. As the ocean warms, it is able to take in less carbon. So there are other reasons. So there are many, therefore, of these feedbacks. Ocean sea ice decline is a feedback, increases warming. Snow decline, melting is a feedback, increases warming. Warming of tropical wetlands, which are deep, deep in carbon, called peat. Subarctic and also tropical wetlands right across the tropics, from Brazil, Amazon to Cameroon and Central Africa, and of course across to Indonesia and the far eastern tropical peatlands. Big source of carbon under the influence of global surface warming.
And are those the triggers then, those feedbacks?
Yeah, as
Those...
soon as we start one of those feedbacks, we've triggered it.
I see.
Because they tend to be self-perpetuating.
Okay.
Plus, we've also got this delay in which the best that we can do will still result in more global heating in the future than we have today.
Okay.
Permafrost is the ultimate terrifying source of feedback, because permafrost creates its own heat. As permafrost thaws and melts, the microbes in the organic material that have been apparently dead for thousands, millions of years, they actually come to life, and they ingest the carbon, and ingesting the carbon, that's how the methane and the CO2 gets released, but they also release heat. Okay. And so permafrost thaw at some stage becomes self-perpetuating and irreversible.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay, thank you. Rafael also asked, what is the feedback of the Amazon collapsing?
Right now, we may, according to the research, we may have lost the southern Amazon. There's satellite data, which I'm afraid very convincingly shows that the Amazon is emitting more carbon than it's taking in. So our task really, and of course, the Amazon is being logged, it's being burnt, right? The fires in the Amazon are huge. In Central Africa, they're huge, and they're eating away at the Amazon. Now, the Amazon is being intentionally destroyed for two reasons. We know one, and that's the livestock and the meat industry transferring to cattle ranch and also soy to feed the cattle. 80% of the deforestation is due to that. That's why we must become vegan. But also, there are massive so-called oil reserves in the Amazon. So that's the other reason why the Amazon is being intentionally destroyed. Some people say that the only answer is to buy it. Right?
Yes. Someone who shall remain nameless, I believe, is suggesting that right now.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's see. Well, thank you to all of those who have said thank you, and you're welcome.
Really appreciate that, guys. Thank you.
So Bruno said, because I did ask for what your reactions are, and Bruno said, I'm scared. So let's talk about that a little bit, get away from the science per se, and let's talk a little bit about how we're feeling about these things. So how do you respond to that?
I'm scared.
Yeah.
I've been scared for decades. I'm scared for my grandchildren. And I think it's pretty actually healthy and sensible to be scared. There's a lot of professionals that say, that we shouldn't allow ourselves to get scared about climate change, right? We shouldn't scare other people, okay? But, we're mammals, right? Fear is actually our survival mechanism, right?
Yeah.
So I think we need to be very supportive of each other in our fear and anxiety for ourselves, for our family, and our future. I think we really, really have to get together. There's an excellent program out of the United States. It's come out of the climate mobilization that has been a key a communicator of the climate emergency
I'm
and
gonna
an
type
activist
that,
on the
yeah.
climate emergency. And they now have an excellent program run by one of their psychologists, and it does just this. Yeah, we need to get together.
And there's something that I'll add there, and that is, oh, somebody wants to come in. Rather than scared, I've struggled with depression. And so Peter has said to me, you know what? Don't be depressed, get angry, and then turn that anger into action. And, you know, you hear all the time about hope. Perhaps the people here, well, if you've got kids, you want to have that.
Yeah, you
that
got to have hope, but
positive sense.
but the hope is action.
Yes,
the hope
exactly.
Is action, right?
So it's not the hope we need, it's the action we need. And then in taking action, making things happen, then that creates hope, right? We can't just, like so many North Americans, they just want to sit around and twiddle their thumbs and be hopeful. They don't actually want to do anything. So hopefully in South America, I think most of you are in South America, I hope that's different. Okay. Oh, Bruno, thank you for assuring us that it will be recorded on the PHA YouTube.
Oh, thank you. That's good news.
You know, because Peter was 5 or 6 minutes into it, and I went, oh no, I forgot to press the record button. So thank you. And again, thank you. Obrigada. Oh, I love Portuguese. Don't you love that word? I love that word. Obrigada.
Yeah.
Okay.
Word.
Yeah. And so Amelia was saying, thank you for the presentation. My question is from the recipient of climate change impact as a small island nation,
Right.
Fiji. Least polluting, what else can we do if our screaming at international forums is not being heard? And you know, here we are, sinking Pacific Islanders. So let's talk about Ecocide and Poly and Vanuatu and Kiribati a little bit, and what they're doing.
But we should talk about the small islands a bit. It's not just that the small islands will get submerged if we allow this insanity to carry on, but it's that small islands, particularly the low-lying ones, are already getting damaged, right? The sea level is higher and they're getting more intense storms, which is inevitable. It's an extreme weather event from climate change. And that is damaging their agricultural base, and it's also causing trouble on their importing food from the small ships, because these storms don't let the small ships come in, right?
Or go out to fish.
So what makes me very, very sad and very, very angry is, of course, we've known from day one, right, that small islands, low-lying islands, were the most vulnerable to climate change, right? So it is absolute awful crime. In my terms, it's a terrible evil. That despite the fact that we have all these lovely small islands around that we all love, right? You know, we see pictures and films of them, that we are allowing our governments, right, and our world economy and our corporations and our banks, right, to continue polluting the planet with greenhouse gases and destroying these islands.
Yeah. So Amelia asked, what can they do besides screaming at the international?
Well, they have done a lot. I mean, it's thanks to the lobbying of the small islands that we have the 1.5 degree C limit.
Good point.
If it wasn't for those islanders, we would not have what is now agreed, but universally agreed to be the danger limit, which is 1.5 degrees C. So even if we've lost 1.5 degrees C, it has been a big wake-up call.
Yes. Right? So thank you, Amelia, and thank you to other sinking Pacific
But it's another thing in which we all have to get together.
Yes, good point.
Right? And we all have to fighting for the small islands. Fighting for Africa is fighting for our future.
Yeah.
Very definitely.
Good point. Yeah. And do look up Ecocide. And if you want to get in touch, Amelia, we have a good friend in Holland, in the Netherlands, who works with Ecocide in the Pacific Islands, and we can hook you up. Vanuatu and Kiribati a bit, I think. We can hook you up. Okay. What about wave energy, Peter?
Yes, wave energy is huge, and it brings into a very important topic, which is the difference between low energy intense power and high energy intense power.
Right.
what we have at the moment with solar energy and wind is low intense power. We can't smelt steel with that.
Right.
But sea energy, ocean energy, is very, very high energy intense, right? So, but it's tricky because the sea is very powerful, and there's been lots of great projects, and they haven't made it. I mean, they've been big projects with big investments,
Okay.
but I don't know enough about wave energy, to be honest with you. But I do know of research in which you can use sort of less engineering and less hardware to derive more energy. So I think wave energy is obviously it's going to be huge in the future. Yeah. Scotland, of course, is probably one of the leaders in that because it's got these turbines, which I gather are working fine.
Great. Good. Good old Scotland. Adrienne said that it's sobering. Yes, definitely sobering, isn't it? This whole topic. Gaspard Prévost has said some research in Nature, late 2020, says a globalized plant-based diet could spare enough land that given back to nature would sink the equivalent of the last 25 years of carbon emitted by fossil burning. What is your sentiment about those results?
Oh, I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's true. The amount of emissions, methane and CO2, of course, but also some nitrous oxide, is vast, right? If I can go vegan, right, everybody can go vegan. I'm a Brit, right? I mean, you used to eat steaks and sausages and stuff, So we can all do it. I mean, it's the healthiest way to be, after all.
Yeah.
One of my questions has to do with this information, and I happen to have just presented some on this topic, and my research revealed that as the GDP increases in a country, it increases also the meat consumption.
Okay.
People, yes, plant-based is the answer, but how to go that way? People will eat more and more meat. Yes, it is clear that it is a problem. But what are your thoughts regarding that? People getting richer, people leaving poverty line, they want to eat meat.
Yeah, it's a status thing.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
And countries like China, for example, and Japan and other parts of East Asia, meat was more like a condiment until very recently. So it was tiny amount with each meal, which was mostly plant-based. And as China's GDP has increased in their level of development, and their growing middle class, they are adopting more and more the sort of North American or Western diet.
Your point is very, very important, and the fact that you're educating people on it is the only answer, right?
Yeah, and maybe see if we can't uncouple it from status somehow. Make going plant-based or plant-focused, or find some term, because vegan still frightens some people for some reason, but find the term that allows people to find status by joining into it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Thanks again, Raphael. Outrage and optimism, as Christina Figueres terms it. Yeah.
She's good. She's still going at it.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I haven't actually come across it, but I know outrage. I know outrage, and that's a powerful emotion. Yeah.
Something that I talk about instead of hope and optimism, I talk about faith, and just that I want to hold a sense of faith that we will rise to the occasion, because we will rise to the challenge, because that is what human beings do and have done so many times in the past. I typed in there the name, the Climate Mobilization. That's the program Peter was talking about.
In the United States.
It's in the United States, but they're looking for people all over the world to move it out more and more. And what they've ended up focusing on is having local municipalities declare the climate emergency, because that's step one. And then you can start to lobby your local communities to take the proper actions. Adrienne said the urgency is compelling and motivating. It is. And so if you can hear it, and one of the things that I've been looking at in my research is that we have to be willing to feel it and lament it if we're going to accept it and then move on and move into action, right? So you'll see people, I mean, there are the kooks who deny climate change. But people who deny it in the sense of, I just don't want to look at it, I don't want to hear about it. Those are the people I suspect who just they're not willing to take it in because they're not willing to feel deeply about it. So that's where compassion comes in, because if you can talk to people about being willing to feel this fear and depression, sadness, whatever, for the people who are already losing their lives, losing their livelihoods and their loved ones and their homes, their entire homelands, their food security, their water sources. If we can encourage each other to develop, to build this compassion for these others, then they're going to be more willing to feel it themselves,
and then to take action. Human beings are very, very good at this.
Yeah. We are actually, but we have to allow ourselves to do that. Yeah.
So, Peter and Julie, I do have a question, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts about atomic energy? Now there's a renewed discussion about new generation of reactors and maybe mini reactors across the globe. And so what's your take on this?
I'm with James Hansen on this one. I mean, I've years ago, I've researched, and sure, there is a statistically very small increase in childhood leukemia, unfortunately, for people that live near nuclear reactions. But I mean, we're looking at the destruction of the whole planet. And there's no question that, as the IPCC says, fission, nuclear fission, is a lowest form of energy.
Of high density energy.
Of high density, very high density energy, right? So the big competition for high density energy has always been between the coal industry and the nuclear fission industry. CO2 lasts forever. It'll take hundreds of thousands of years for all the carbon dioxide to be removed from the atmosphere that industrial civilization has produced. So I think that's a good way of looking at it. There's no perfect solution, but I agree with the people that say that we really, really need nuclear fission as an important part of our energy production. Then we can get off it later on.
So it's almost like a bridge. Yeah, it's like, it just seems crazy right now to get rid of a zero carbon energy source when we need zero carbon energy sources. So,
and by the way, the oldest reactors are the lowest carbon reactors, obviously. Right. And they are in places they're actually being refurbished, right?
Yeah. So I mean, you can really create a rift between people by talking about nuclear power, right? And the new, what do they call them? Small,
the compact modular reactors, the molten salt. So they are orders of magnitude far safer, than the liquid cooled reactors that we've got around the world right now. But they're being opposed, right?
Yes, and
they're being opposed by our friends and colleagues.
You got to sit down over a glass of wine or something, and just make a pact. You're going to stay friends over the discussion about nuclear whenever nuclear comes up, right? Yeah. So,
Thanks for the question.
Yeah,
very relevant.
It's a toughie, that one. So buying the Amazon, maybe also Northern Canada. This is from Yvonne. Maybe also Northern Canada, Greenland, Siberia should be put in this combo to be bought too. Buying is not the solution, but a change in attitude. That's brilliant. I agree. be nice if our governments just did the right thing, right?
And you're right about Canada. I mean, we live in
Yeah.
British Columbia here, which of course is, a forest industry. It's been called the Brazil of the North. Canada's forests a bit more than they take in on carbon dioxide.
Did you say that? Wait, did you just say our forests emit more carbon?
Yeah.
Than they're
Yeah, they're a
sinking
carbon
right now?
source.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Oh,
The taiga, Siberia and the circumpolar taiga.
TAIGA.
I agree on attitude. We need to more than respect our great forests, right?
Yeah.
We need to be in awe of them.
Yeah.
Right. Here in British Columbia now, all our deciduous trees, in southern, they're coming out. They're absolutely glorious. I think we should fall in love with trees and fall in love with forests. There's a famous Brit called Richard St. Barr Baker, who traveled around the world. He became known as the man of the trees. You're right on attitude. We have to have a very different attitude about trees. I think we have to fall in love with the forest.
Yeah. Good point. Well, and the earth generally, right?
Yeah.
I'm writing his name here. If I can get my fingers on the right keys, Richard St.
Barbe.
Baker.
Yeah.
He's wonderful. If you don't know him already, take that extra B out of there. There we go. Okay, we need to wrap up in about 6 minutes. So let's see if we can get through these. Thank you so much for all your comments, by the way. This is great. Liliane at 412 put in the stopecocide.earth website if you want to go to 4:12 p.m.
Yeah. I presented with Polly Higgins a few years ago at The Hague, and we both presented on what Polly called climate ecocide, making climate ecocide a crime against humanity. So we presented at The Hague under the Rome Statute. Oh my God, what a loss.
Yeah. Polly died 2 years ago.
Yeah.
The day before Earth Day, I think. Yeah. What a loss. Liliane says action is the remedy for sure. And it can look different for everybody, but we need to be moving. Everybody needs to be moving.
Naomi Orestes,
Oreskes,
American academic who has written papers in this great book exposing the crime, the deception, the denial of the fossil fuel industry. And she, of course, was asked this question: do you ever get depressed? And she said, not often. I work too hard at it. She said the answer to depression is action.
Yeah, that's so
and
true.
She does.
Yeah. Just a second, where did we get to? Sorry, Peter, and also Julie, what would be your expectations for the coming years regarding the adoption of a sustainable energy source? Is it a goal that will be achieved with the next generation or two?
Yes, it will. And the reason it has to be. And people are increasingly, rapidly becoming aware of the dire situation that we're in. The emergency was only recognized, I guess, like 18 months ago or something like that. And the emergency declarations just swept around the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That is huge progress. And although what we're doing to the planet is still, devastating, we have huge progress along the way, and we have all the energy we need. Right. All the technology is there, in place, and we're producing it and it's growing, but we can't solve our problem just with renewable energy. We have to work at beating down the fossil fuel industry.
Right.
That's what we have to work at.
Right. Good point. Gaspar said, losing the feeling of powerlessness is healing for sure. Because we're not powerless, are we? Like we can build political will, for example. And a lot of people in democracies don't understand that it's more than, voting every few years. There's so much more that we can do. We have to what's the word? Like we have to be louder than the fossil fuel lobbyists. So we write an occasional letter, Yahoo. Well, the fossil fuel lobbyists, there are several in there every day, in your president's office, in your prime minister's office, in your environment minister's office. and we have to become louder than the fossil
Yeah, and
fuel
we can be
lobbyists.
supportive in many ways of all the legal actions which are being taken against the fossil fuel industry, particularly the legal actions by the young people. You know, our Children's Trust, which was a legal action against the fossil fuel industry, specifically against the government support of the fossil fuel industry. That started about 11 years ago, at least in the States. It's been very, very successful. It's spread to other countries. We have young people assisted by lawyers, you know, who are doing it for the love of the work, and this is a great thing, and this is something we can support and get behind very powerfully.
Hey, you know where they won was in Colombia, right? The young people in Colombia
Yes,
won that
right.
case,
Yeah,
and the court
Thanks,
said
Julie.
that the
That's
court
right.
said that the government has to start taking their welfare, their future into consideration.
They won in Holland as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Raquel, thank you. Appreciate that. Amelia, thanks. There we go, Granda. Oh, thanks, everybody. Education on health benefits of plant-based predominantly. Yeah, that, I mean, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And it's happening more and more.
that's a really
Yeah.
good point. It needs to get into the schools.
Yes,
right?
true. Yeah.
Right.
It's been scary. There was a time when to be even vegetarian, but more and more vegan. Actually, I'll give you who's that from? Liliane. Let's see, Green Hearted. Check out my website, greenhearted.org, and then go down to the go down the navigation. You'll find my vegan schools page. There was a time when that was scary, and now there's more and more research, right, saying
People
that,
thought it was
yeah,
odd, weird.
and now I say to
Yeah.
people, you know, nobody ever died from not having meat at lunch at school. So, yeah, Christina. Oh, interesting. And yeah, if celebrities join the vegan plant-based diet, that would help out. Maybe we need to ask them, because there are a handful, but maybe there need to be celebrities in every country, for example. Right?
There are some
Woody Harrelson.
high-level athletes as well.
Yes, high-level
you know,
athletes
that have been very, very helpful on this.
Yeah, that's right. And yep, do it in our everyday practice. Now, I want to say your name properly, Mr. Ferreira, but I don't know how to pronounce it. Can you tell me how to pronounce it? Do you have a mic there?
Vinicius.
Vinicius. Woo, I love that name.
I'm glad you asked.
Vinicius.
I am particularly glad you asked the question.
Which question? We haven't asked it yet.
Oh, okay.
In which ways do you think the climate change makes us more vulnerable to other possible pandemics? Wow.
So I noticed several years ago, at least I think 8 years ago, publications, scientific publications coming out from infectious disease experts who had become interested in climate change. You know what they said? They said practically all infectious and communicable diseases will be increased by global surface warming, and we will see new diseases.
Oh.
So this was actually predicted.
Okay. Yeah. And that is it the habitat destruction due to a changing climate chaos?
Yeah. Zones changing.
Oh, right. Zones changing.
But also driving that is deforestation as well.
Okay.
Right.
Good point. Yeah. Thank you, Vinicius. Oh, I like that name. It sounds so Roman.
Oh, careful yourself.
Sorry. Okay. I never studied the Roman. Okay. Mayara, I believe it is. My generation, the 90s, almost was born listening to global. Yeah. Good point. I mean, that's the water you've been swimming in all your life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now we've gone a little bit over time. We're happy to stay. So if you folks want to stay, please do. But it became.
I want to respond.
Okay.
That. Certainly in my personal experience, the most important thing on an environmental campaign is talk. Talk it up, right?
Okay.
That's the basis.
Oh, I see. Because the rest of Mayara's question is, but it became so normal and people just don't do anything. How to start this conversation again?
Yeah.
Now, we gave you the link to the climate mobilization, and Peter mentioned the program that Margaret Klein Salomon is now running, is all about climate conversations. So getting back, like, and you actually, it's really fun because you go online and you choose a date, and you'll meet people from around the world who are also online at the same time. And then she's got little video starters, and then you discuss that question, and then another video asks another question, and you discuss it with people from around the world. So that's really neat, and it feeds your soul.
There's another way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the media was really terrible on climate change for many years.
Yeah.
They have changed completely. They're very, very, very good at reporting climate change now. So if you put a Google alert on climate change, right, you will get some very powerful media headlines coming through these days, and they are easy to use. Right.
Okay.
Guess what? The Washington Post says such and such and such and such. They're coming out all the time.
And you mean on social media?
Yeah.
Put it out on
social media. Yes,
okay.
Julie. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Take the headlines from the well-known, New York Times, and all of them, and put those out on social media. Just put the headlines out. The media being very helpful in communicating climate change these days.
Neat. Good idea. Thank you for that, Mayara. Rodrigo, this is an interesting point. Long-term impacts are already happening with fossil fuels.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Nuclear. Oh, Liliane has asked, nuclear plants are also using massive amounts of water.
True. Yeah, true. But the newer ones, of course, they don't have to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Thank you, Rodrigo. That's that's great. A good fiery talk to kick off the week. That's from Richard. Is there a little community within the PHA network that is keeping climate emergency front and center? If so, where can I find them? To kind of get into discussions.
I think that's something that we need to make happen. Is the impression that I'm getting. Yeah. So yeah, let's look into that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, folks, for all the kind words. And Manuela asked, on a social class level, it's very hard to become vegan. They work for 12 hours and have no access to healthy food.
Oh yeah, that's true in the United States.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's an interesting thing because theoretically, eating fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds should be so much less expensive than eating meat. But so often
meat is subsidized more.
Good point. And in food, what here we call food deserts, communities where there's no shopping center, no grocery store, and people are kind of buying junk food to eat. The meat, like it's meat in the burritos that are for sale in the corner store, and it's that's a very good point, Manuela. And do you have a sense of what we can do with that or do about that?
I don't. It's very hard to talk to to communicate to those people because they work for 12 hours and then they go home and then have to sleep and they take like 2 hours transportation. And it's something that has to be thought, I think.
What about urban agriculture? Is that a possibility that someone could, that in each neighborhood, there could be somebody kind of looking out for the fruit and vegetable health of that particular neighborhood? Or
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I wonder, because we're seeing that more and more in Canada right now. Urban farms, they're called urban farms, and they might just be like one empty block. A house wasn't built there for whatever reason. And instead of lawn or instead of just an old lot with, garbage and stuff piling up, they're turning it into gardens.
We have one thing that has happened here, which clearly needs to be happened in other countries. We can get vegan sausage, vegan chicken, vegan everything. Okay. Now the purists years ago said they didn't like this idea. Vegan prawns, these products are actually amazingly good. The vegan cheeses are incredible,
but they're not they're not cheap.
True.
Yeah.
I guess they're not. No, I guess that's true.
So maybe one of the things we need to do is to be pushing for subsidization. Like we're asking governments to stop subsidizing fossil fuels and don't just suck up the money, to put that money over and subsidize renewable energy. Perhaps we could be doing the same. So stop subsidizing animal agriculture that is so destructive and move that money into subsidizing healthy foods. So fruits and nuts and vegetables and grains for everybody, but perhaps, I mean, we know governments know where the poorer neighborhoods are, where the, where projects need to happen, right, to get people eating better.
I think this switch is going on in the EU, I gather,
Mm-hmm.
on subsidy shift.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's
now
good,
something
Joe.
else strikes me, Manuel, and that is in India, a lot of women make money, like their job is to have a little stall and they sell one thing. So, they
one form of
one
food.
one form of food.
Yeah. Okay.
And so a woman, well, anyone coming home from work that day could buy for not a lot of money because, but they could come home and they could buy that from that vendor and that from that woman across the road, and then and some fruit or veg from that person over there. And they go home and their dinner's kind of already made for them, and 3 women have made a living from it. Now, I don't know all the details, but maybe we need to start sharing ideas amongst.
That's a much better economy.
Yeah.
Is what that
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Manuel.
And Liliane said community support programs, including gardens and fresh produce, would be effective in food deserts. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Richard the tiffin economy in India. That's right.
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 Yes,
the tiffins. Tiffins are these wonderful, usually stainless steel lunch containers, and they get delivered. So
there's multiple levels.
Yeah, the person at home makes the lunch for the person who goes off to lunch, and then tiffin wallas. So people, usually men on bicycles, they'll have like 30 different, these big metal canisters on their bikes, and they know exactly whose goes to where.
And that's the local economy again.
And remember there was a movie about a love affair between people whose tiffins got crossed in the, I can't remember. Anyway, Rafaela, thank you. And we really, really, really have enjoyed yakking with you guys today. This has been wonderful. And I got to tell you, Zoom told me that we had, as of maybe an hour before, told me that we had one person signed up. So this has been a joy to have 28 or 30 of you. So thank you very, very much
and
for
particularly
coming.
from where you all come from.
Yes.
Really loved it.
It's just
really
been great.
Yeah.
So actually, let me put up, I'll just put up the page with our contact information one last time. So please do get in touch. You can get in touch through our websites if you want to carry on the conversation. And who was it who talked about getting the PHA to talk more about the emergency? We'll see what we can do. Yeah, Richard. We'll see what we can do. So write to us, and then we'll have your contact info, and maybe we can make something happen. And thank you so much. And I'll leave the last word to Peter.
Thank you for your support. And you're the hope of the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Good point.
You're the hope of the world. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
We're going to do this because we have to, because it's the right thing. So thank you so much. It feels so good to be talking with you.
Yeah. Good. Take good care of yourselves. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And yes, it was called The Lunchbox. You're right, Liliane. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a great movie. Yeah. Okay.